So, for example, there were quite a lot of comments about squash, which attracted a level of feedback that we hadn't anticipated, but a number of people commented particularly on the level of squash provision in the new centre. A number were about the option to have a 50-metre pool instead of a 25-metre pool. Some were about were we going to include climbing and indoor climbing provision. A number were around the transport arrangements, the proximity of that site relative to the current Holman Lees site of the Magnet Leisure Centre, and some were around which other sports. Tennis was another one that was mentioned as an example. I think 11 of the comments were more specific about how will the transport infrastructure support the increased use of the expanded leisure centre. What is proposed, and I must hold my hand up and say, as Jenny's here, it is all still subject to a planning process, of course. That's not only true for the leisure centre, but it's also true for the school. But a number of the comments that we did receive were specific to how the location in a what is effectively the edge of town area compared to the operation in its very central town location now. There's been reference in what the speakers have referred to in terms of the expansion of the existing Forest Bridge School and whether that expansion is suitable for Braewood Park. The area that I've identified on the plans allows for that expansion. That has been built into those needs, so we're not talking about a bigger space than has previously been consulted on. It's within that zone that's been clearly marked. I don't believe we've been doing this under the radar, as someone has suggested. I think we've done this in a very public way, and the 110 responses that actually were people who have decided to respond to the material that we put out, to me is strong evidence of a good public awareness of the fact that we have got proposals, that we are adopting the master plan approach, and that this is part of the next stage of the site's utilisation. So, in terms of the key aspects, as I understand them from Councillor Werner's call-in, there's an issue around the loss of this land. Reference has been made to a relocation of the Maidenhead Target Shooting Club. That is the intention of the borough. That is still subject not only to a separate planning process, but the intention, and we're working with a possible location which would secure an appropriate use or an appropriately set up site for an alternative location. There's reference in Councillor Werner's call-in to the availability or the non-availability of the area in question to local residents and community groups. I hope I've explained that not only will the school use, and Joe described earlier on, a very high proportion of children who are local residents who will be using the school, but also some of the shared use that will be able, and no doubt I suspect, the community use of the school, as there is the case in many of our schools. Various community groups make use of their facilities when it's not being used as schools. I think this has been discussed in a public forum. The report that has been called in went to the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny panel en route to Cabinet. Consideration was given at that stage to the issue of the heads of terms of the lease that were being discussed, and that was predominantly a Children's Services issue, and that's why it went to Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny. I accept that it hasn't yet been considered by the Cultural and Community Services Overview and Scrutiny panel, but there has been significant public activity to raise awareness of the proposals, as I've outlined already. There has also been, I believe, considerable thought given to the impact on the other users, and indeed the responses to the consultation that we've had would suggest that actually the current users have not got an issue with the proposed use of the area I've described for the school. I think the call-in also makes reference to the other activities on the park. Hopefully I've explained how we try and manage what is a very high demand area. If you go down on a Sunday morning and you're interested in rugby, you will see something in the region of 600 kids of all sorts of ages, from the under 6s up to the under 17s, making use of all sorts of different areas of the site. The new leisure centre proposals are still in development. We haven't yet got a definitive final solution. That work has started. The borough is investing £29 million in the reprovision of the leisure centre. The existing magnet, as many of you will know, is now 47 years old, I think, 42 years old, 1975, I don't do my maths. Albeit it was subject to a significant refurbishment in the early 90s, the reality is that it has been a very heavily used centre and does need to be re-provided, and as you will know, it's part of that development area, and the decision has been to make use of relocating that to the Braybrooke Park. As I said, the Children's Services Overview Scrutiny Panel en route to Cabinet at the end of March did look at the report. So I hope that I've covered off most of the points that Councillor Werner has raised. I'm happy to try and take questions if you think there are areas that I've missed. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question, Chairman. You mentioned the Maidenhead Advertiser reports. I've got that up on the phone. It says, have your say on the 29 million Braybrooke Leisure Centre plans, written by, I think, written by you. And the first paragraph says, you can have your say over the facilities you think should go into a new multi-million-pound leisure centre in Braybrooke Park. So the focus of it all was the leisure centre. It does mention the school halfway down, but it ends by saying, the email says, email Braybrooke Leisure Centre at rwm.gov.uk with any suggestions about facilities you would like to see in the new leisure centre. So it makes it out to be very much about the leisure centre. Doesn't mention here that you can comment on the school specifically. I don't believe that 100 out of a town of this size represents a significant number either. Do you really believe that the Maidenhead Advertiser alone really captures a public consultation on this issue?
Do you want to answer that?
Well, please.
You are quite right. The focus of the press launch was led by the proposals for the proposed Braybrooke Leisure Centre, but there were comments received on various aspects, and the plans were clear in that consultation that they included as part of the master plan proposals the reprovision of the Forest Bridge School on the site.
And how many of those 110 responses mentioned the school?
And none raised the school issues.
So from that, the public weren't consulted on the school. The public were consulted on the leisure centre.
Thank you for that contribution. It's clearly we have to consider that as to where that sits in terms of what should have happened and what has happened. I'd just like to remind members of the panel of where this discussion has previously come before us. We did talk about the Plainfield strategy. We did talk about the development of the Braybrooke Park site, and in those plans, the Forest Bridge School actually was part of that consultation. It was part of it in terms of being positioned as a component of a new development. It seems to me, specifically, because it was effectively a replacement tenant for the shooting club area and the nursery area that it would occupy. Now, those lands were for the leaseholder's use as a private in identifying the use for an educational use, obviously was driven through our children's services area and went through scrutiny in terms of whether or not that process would be correct in terms of the school. It strikes me as an observation now, needing to explore a little more perhaps. The very nature of the land that was being utilised, was proposed to be utilised by Forestwood School, is land that was contracted to under the shooting club lease and nursery lease. The shooting club lease is hopefully being re-established on another location and therefore presents no loss of amenity to those members. And the potential of the school to operate a multi-user facility actually increases the net sport and leisure capability of the site. Now, in terms of pulling it together and making it, as it should, a proper public consultation of what is clearly a large piece of land with multiple uses, I think we can dig into this and we can look at areas where, in terms of the left hand and the right hand, we're saying one thing and trying to do the right thing, but not shuffling the pack so that it was together in one suit, because we have here an interest in children's services in terms of producing an excellent school. And I've heard no comment regarding the nature of the school or actual criticism of the aspiration of the school. And then clearly our aspiration as a council is to actually provide top-notch sport and leisure facilities and to utilise the Braeburn site fully. What's in question here is whether or not this is something which genuinely should have done, or even to the extent that we would like to record it and actually have a review in terms of something that went so far wrong that actually we should be reconsidering as to how we went through the process. Or whether actually what we have is something where it was quite reasonable to look at a piece of land that was leased and look at alternative use for it, and to then move on looking at the leisure facilities around it, and to make sure that the users that previously occupied that land would actually not be disadvantaged, and potentially the public being advantaged by having a multi-user sports facility, or whether or not that is actually something which is a fault and something which needs to be rectified, or whether it's actually something which on balance is actually of no fault.